Hey folks, welcome back to another video on Hearthstone's upcoming game mode, Mercenaries. This time around, I'm going to take a closer look at the caster characters that we've seen so far in Mercenaries. I just want to run through their various abilities, talking through some potential strategies, what these characters might be utilized for, how they might synergize with other styles of play, and give you basically a little preview, a heads up here on what to expect in Mercenaries. That said, let's jump into it here with Xyrella, the first of many casters I'll cover in this video. And one of her abilities here, Blinding Luminance, which will deal 2 damage to an enemy and give it -2 attack this turn. So a little bit of a damage boost and a debuff here to attack. And this is looking like it's going to be a high speed ability. So this might be something that you try to weave in before your allies attack into an enemy so that they take less return damage potentially if you have like a really attack focused team. Alternatively, if your opponent has some kind of crazy attack synergy or attack buff thing happening, or some character you're worried is really going to do a ton of damage, this might be a great way to debuff them. Keep in mind, this is the tier 1 version of this ability, so presumably both the damage output here and the attack debuff will scale pretty notably to where it makes, I think, a rather large impact even on high level characters. Because at a base level, right, there's many characters, as you can see here with Xyrella herself, if I move my head, where this would take them down to 0. Now, I doubt it will keep up where it like reduces people's attack to 0s. Regularly, especially considering buffs and equipments and all these sorts of things. But I bet it still takes a big chunk out of most attack values. So might make attacks or return damage totally free in some cases, which seems like to me it could be very powerful, especially if this does indeed retain a high speed like 3. Maybe I should say a quick speed. I'm still working on the terminology there. If it's still a quick speed like this one that you can get in early, that seems really powerful on a given turn. So Xyrella's next ability here is Flash Heal. Very simply just restores 5 health. So patch up Xyrella herself, maybe on another allied mercenary. Again, this one has a pretty quick speed, all things considered. They're at 4, assuming it stays there, which means, you know, you probably get this in before your opponent resolves like a big attack, maybe get enough health on a character to keep them alive for a turn, or to keep them alive to get their own big crazy ability off. So some in a pinch healing makes a big difference, I'm sure. I guess I have to wonder if there's enough utility here. Maybe keep an eye on things like holy synergy, since this is a holy ability, or things that perhaps scale or change the way healing works across other mercenaries. Might open up some additional angles for this one. And then finally here we have Atonement for Xyrella, a 9 speed ability here, really slow, with a cooldown of 1 turn as well. It deals 9 damage and it gains +1 damage each time your party restores 20 health. So potentially scaling here long term. Now, at first glance, like 20 health sounds like a lot to get just 1 damage, right? For what I would consider, you know, a minor upgrade here to the damage. Now, at first I thought like, oh, maybe that's like throughout the course of an entire PvE run, but there's no indication here that this is like permanent. So I think this is within combat, and my instincts tell me that this 20 health might decrease as this ability increases in its tier. So if you get to like Atonement 5 instead of Atonement 1, maybe it only takes like 10 health or something. Alternatively, it might just be that there are plenty of scaling healing outputs that 20 as a static number actually gets pretty easy to achieve when you have a bunch of like tier 5 abilities, like maybe Flash Heal heals for 10, and this starts to scale up a little bit quicker. We'll also see another character who has like AoE healing in this video. So maybe the 20 health isn't quite as intimidating to get to, but I still feel like that damage increment isn't huge, but maybe that, you know, goes to +2 damage on a higher tier, +3 damage, etc. And it really starts to build on itself. Or maybe it's permanent throughout a run, but I don't know. I'm just feeling like we'll see another ability in the future that doesn't sound permanent at all. So I think this is just, you know, within a combat that it's going to scale on this damage. Otherwise, it would feel like it's scaling permanently to the character and just getting better and better forever, you know, between runs even, because abilities exist in between runs as permanently upgradable objects otherwise. So anyway, long story short, you know, you've got here some big potential damage output, single target damage in particular, but it does feel really, really slow. So I don't know if this like incrementing damage output is going to be enough to make this big burst finisher worth it, which I think all in all leaves Xyrella in a bit of a weird spot for me. Like, she's kind of got a mix of just like, I think this debuff feels pretty cool, but Flash Heal's not that exciting to me. And as like a setup or an enabler for atonement, it's not that great. So maybe you need like other synergies, more healing, which feels like you're walking down this really narrow path. So I'm not sure Xyrella has the sort of flexibility or utility that I would expect or compared to other characters we've seen so far. So is this like debuff going to be enough? Is this heal packing enough punch? I just have a lot of big questions for Xyrella. I feel like from the other kits and abilities I've seen so far, hers just feel a little bit too narrow in focus and might make her maybe awkward to use. All right, so now let's move on to our buddy Millhouse. I love this freaking artwork for Millhouse. It's so good. He summoned a mirror image version of himself, and he stole the ice cream code from the mirror image version, and for some reason it's now fully corporeal. It's just he's eaten 2 ice cream codes. Fantastic art. Anyway, Millhouse's first ability here is Arcane Explosion. It's an AoE that deals 2 damage to all enemies. Pretty quick speed at 4, and just some chip damage. 2 damage is not a lot. We see some pretty big health totals out there. Even early on, right before any of this is upgraded, even at base levels, like it's going to take quite a few of these to really get through stuff. But if there's like a character lingering on the other side of the board, just a few health remaining that you didn't quite get a finishing blow on, this might be a nice way to do that. There are also, we've seen some synergies, like if a character's damaged, certain things could happen. So AoE effects that might just hit everybody could pop divine shields, could deal some damage for, those sorts of synergies. There are still utilities here outside of just exactly damage, but, across all characters, it's still dealing 6 total, which isn't bad. Now, that said, I have a feeling, my instinct tells me that like focusing damage in and trying to burst characters down so that they can't use abilities is going to be better than softening up an entire enemy party all at once. Because, it's any game, you want to focus fire the most, threatening, scary thing. If your opponent has some character that's just going to blow up later and has like a 2-turn cooldown ability, you want to burn through them, right? You don't want to like soften them up over multiple turns. So my instincts tell me that the AoE here won't be as good unless you can just really play off of it, but it might still be solid in PvE, like cleaning up little trash minions and stuff across from you, as opposed to maybe PvP where you might have to be a little bit more focused and directed in your game plan. So speaking of direct damage, here we got Arcane Bolt. It's going to deal 4 to a single target, so twice as much there, nothing to scoff at. Plus, it's going to give you an arcane damage buff, which is going to buff any other arcane abilities like Arcane Explosion, or in fact, our third ability, which we'll talk about here in a second. So a nice little scaling buff. You use this a few times, you're going to make that AoE much more noteworthy. You're going to make your third ability much stronger. So you're probably going to open up combats with Arcane Bolt a few times so you feel like you're really getting some damage flowing. But that said, let's go ahead and move on to the third ability here for Millhouse. It's Greater Arcane Missiles. It shoots 3 missiles at random enemies that deal 5 damage each. So, some undirected damage here, but big damage output. This is 15 damage. Also scaling with the buff here from Arcane Bolt, because you're going to have that extra damage. So these will get big pretty quickly. And now this does have a 2-turn cooldown, so this is more of like a finisher probably, or something you're not certainly going to be using every turn. You got to wait a couple turns in between uses, but it's going to pump out some big damage. If you get a couple arcane bumps in there, this is going to deal 7 each or 21 total damage, which, as you can see, it's way more damage output than any of these other tier 1 abilities we've seen. So this is clearly going to be a big heavy hitter, but it is slow at that 9 speed. So, if Millhouse dies because he's taken 2+ turns to get this off, and it's a 9 speed, so they have that turn, it's probably going to be the last thing cast in a combat. It might be rather risky. So you're going to have to do some work to protect Millhouse potentially to get this off. So it may not be worth it if you've taken too long to kind of set up for this big finisher using your arcane damage boosts. This may not get off at all. That's a real downside and risk there. So this does feel like a character that has like these big payoffs, but it requires a lot of setup. So you might need other characters to like sort of facilitate this, like speed buffs, those sorts of things, or maybe just a lot of defensive and disruption sort of things. So you have a big protector out there that interrupts your opponents a lot, keeps Millhouse alive, and then he has time to get to this point where this card or this ability is really rewarding and pushes a ton of damage. But I don't think you want to just stick Millhouse out there on his own, because he takes too long to get rolling. He's probably not going to be as efficient as other characters that might have just immediate damage and don't, encourage additional buffs and really, really slow payoffs like greater arcane missiles here. All right, so moving on over here to Anduin, legendary mercenary. And I know the graphics all over the place. I'm just taking these from various places that Blizzard has shared them. We don't have high-res versions. These are like screen caps from the reveal video, all sorts of stuff. So bear with me here on the appearances. But this is Anduin. His first ability is Holy Nova. Now keep in mind when we're looking at these are tier 3s. So these are upgraded a little bit from the tier 1 version. So the numbers might be a little bit bigger in these cases. Now this deals 8 damage to all enemies. So pretty solid AoE it seems. And restores 4 health to your party. So basically taking Holy Nova, the card, and scaling it up quite a bit. And that's a lot of healing gained, right? So this could be something that enables like that Xyrella to deal additional damage. That said, are you going to want to have 2 casters out on your team at once? Because you might want a really balanced team to take advantage of critical hits. If you have all blue characters, that might be a risk. So you can't maybe run too much healing. Maybe you can. We'll find out, but it seems risky to me to be a little too all in on casters outside of particular PvP combats where you might be fighting against a protector team that are particularly weak to casters, where in this case this could be a really, really big damage output. But I like this ability, right? It's got some built-in flexibility because there's survivability and damage output. Basically that means in any given turn you're not like too at risk. Like like, oh my god, I might die. You're still healing, but it's like, oh, I might be able to kill them if this lines up. You're still dealing damage. You're getting kind of both upsides there. And at 5 speed, this isn't an especially slow ability, so you might actually be able to get it off before your opponent's stronger abilities as well, getting in those like clutch heals when it matters. Next up here for Anduin, we have Penance, which is basically a single target version of Holy Nova. Deals 10 to an enemy and restores 12 health to a random friendly human. So not a target here on the heal, but you can target the damage, importantly. And a little bit quicker speed here at 4. So, this is less total output than your previous card, but if you really need to focus fire someone down, it might actually be worth it for just a little bit extra single target healing. Now, I wonder if the 12 health restore here is prioritized to damaged characters. We see some prioritization in other random effects in Hearthstone, like Selfless Hero in Battlegrounds will hit something that doesn't have a Divine Shield. I wonder if this will hit something that's damaged. In that case, you might prefer to really heal one particular character. Also of note, this is a friendly human. So if you don't have any other humans in your party and you just have Anduin, you might be able to guarantee that this hits Anduin specifically, which could be important, right? So you have some control there depending on how you build your team. If you have another human that might be like a protector and then some non-human, you have like maybe a 50-50 to hit that good protector character who might need the big heal. So less total output than the previous ability, but maybe a little bit more focus, which I think seems like it'll be good in Mercenaries. Again, I think I value even like 2 extra damage may not sound like much on a single target, but if that's what gets you over the hump, that could be an important distinction to like kill that particular character across from you, that enemy that would otherwise get off some big ability or make a big impact, because 2 damage might make a difference. And then finally here we have Holy Word Salvation, a 3 speed ability, so very quick. 2 turn cooldown, so don't get to use it often. And it reads, your humans take 8 less damage this turn, which that's awesome. It's basically Power Word Shield from World of Warcraft type effect, Discipline Priest stuff happening here essentially. And it is human synergy as well, so if you want to get a lot of value out of this awesome seeming ability, you might need to run a full human composition, which in some ways makes Penance, reliable. It's going to hit any of your characters, but also could kind of limit the ability to control Penance as well. You may not be able to focus it onto that one key character. But still, this is a big damage debuff, and I like the fact that it's prevention-based as well. That can make a big difference because sometimes it's hard to like heal up a character if your opponent really focuses them down. Timing on the heal might be wrong based on when it goes off and its speed and so on, but this just, as a low speed ability, is pretty likely to get off before they hit anybody. So that seems like a nice little shield style effects. So essentially, Anduin has a mix here of damage output and life gain support style effects, which I think that's a lot of flexibility. This to me feels like a more complete set of abilities than Xyrella's, which feel a little bit more limited and inflexible in some ways or require a lot more support. So I guess the question for Anduin will be, is he really limited to like a human synergy? Does that limit the amount of builds he can be played in? And is that worth it for these effects or not? Or will other just stronger characters that aren't humans demand Anduin kind of falls to the wayside because his abilities just aren't good enough without a full human composition? But, again, maybe just Anduin himself or one other like protector human is enough to make this ability worth it. We'll have to see. All right, so next up here is Blink Fox. It's awesome that Blink Fox is a mercenary. I think that's so cool. They took a really beloved character and just made it a mercenary. Again, these are tier 3 abilities, so keep that in mind for the numbers. This effect in particular is really cool. It reads, this is always a copy of a random enemy ability and is 3 speed faster, and it swaps after you use it. So this is really cool, right? This is basically like Blink Fox kind of from Hearthstone, being a Burgle style card. But now we get to steal our opponent's abilities, and they're much faster, which I think will be a big deal. So, sometimes your opponent will have like really powerhouse abilities, just like crazy strong stuff that are like 9 speed. And this makes them much, much quicker. So that could be very disruptive, could really screw with your opponent's turns, and, using their best stuff against them can be demoralizing as well. So I like this a lot. This seems like it's going to be great. It's swapping after use means you can also maybe save that key ability for the right moment as opposed to it swapping every turn. Or if, you want to try to fish for a better ability, you might be able to use, maybe a suboptimal one just to keep rolling for that next one. So some interesting ways to use Mind Thief. The applications there are intriguing, but I think this might be really good. I think speed will be very, very important because there are always going to be key moments in a fight where your opponent's about to kill you and you have to do something before they kill you. And having a speed that's 3 faster means you might be able to get that off. And I'd say keep an eye on this one for sure. Next up is Mana Blink, a 10 speed. 2 cooldown ability. This is actually insane. This refreshes your party's abilities. Their next ability is 3 speed faster. So I'm, kind of taking a guess here that refresh means the cooldowns are reset. Refresh otherwise might be hard to explain. So big cooldown effects, you get to use again immediately, like 2 turns in a row, and they're going to be 3 speed faster. And again, I think speed is going to be really important, as I just explained. And if you're getting your best abilities back immediately, getting to use them twice in a row, and they're quicker, that seems like it's going to be a very big tide turner in any given combat. So this seems strong. Now, again, it's 10 speed, right? So it's very susceptible to being interrupted, frozen out. Blink Fox could just die. And it's a 2-turn cooldown as well, so it takes a little while to get off. You might also have to kind of line it up with the abilities you want to see refreshed at the right times for like the most immediate kind of impactful swing over multiple turns in a row. But if you do get it off, man, I think it's going to be really, really strong. I wonder if it's just too hard to use. And then finally here we have Arcane Fling. It's 8 damage ability with a combo effect that will deal 16 instead. So combo means if there was another arcane ability used this turn by your team, then this one's going to combo and deal additional damage. Now, keep in mind this is 5 speed, so when this goes off, if you have to have already used another arcane combo, you might have to have a pretty speedy arcane spell to make this one pay off, but I'm sure you'll be building your team in a way where that makes sense. You've got another character with a cheap arcane spell you're happy to pull off. I'd say, like, for instance, if we look at Millhouse here real quick, you could do Arcane Explosion into Blink Fox's ability here, Arcane Fling, for that big 16 damage. Also, keep in mind, that 16 damage can be critical hit on a protector to 32 damage, which is kind of the biggest single target damage number we've seen so far for a tier 3 ability. So the potential here is really high, I think, for single target burst damage if you're able to combo it successfully. It's not bad, even if you're not. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if these like burst damage enablers like Arcane Fling are key for finishing off opponents in a timely fashion. So all in all, I mean, I think Blink Fox's kit here is really cool. You got some kind of sneakiness. You've got some speed / buff utility happening with Mana Blink, and also just big finishing potential also with Arcane Fling. So I could see almost like a combo setup happening here with Blink Fox, where you just kind of maybe have a couple bad early rounds and then just blow up on your opponent over a turn or two with all kinds of crazy burst damage, and just like, cooldown refreshes and so on. So, that's kind of like what a combo deck would play, right? Like just stall, and then boom, you're dead. Blink Fox seems like the perfect kind of mercenary for that sort of play. All right, so for this next one, we got a bit of a look at Alexstrasza. Now, keep in mind, this is like screenshots from gameplay, so this is not perfect at all. And the speed values we don't really have on this one. I think technically they're discernible, but I want to be careful, particularly on these. Now, again, all these numbers can change anyway, so who knows. But I just want to take a look because we do have the actual abilities here for Alexstrasza, so we can get an idea what her character is about at the very least. Up first is Dragon Queen's Gambit, 2 cooldown ability. Deal damage to an enemy equal to their attack. So this feels really cool. Like this could be a way to like counter any sort of buff composition. We've seen a few different attack buff characters already in the Protectors. If that's really prominent in the meta, you could use this to really punish people who buff their attack. Weirdly, this has been reduced to 0 speed or whatever in some sort of mechanism in the game that this was showcased in. It's obviously not a 0 speed ability that's been buffed. This is one you might actually want to go like a little slower in theory. Like if your opponent's about to buff their characters, you might want this to go at the end of a turn. So speed decreases here could actually almost be a downside. In some cases, you might want it to be slower to maximize damage after your opponent has already resolved a buff. And if their buff is a slower speed buff, you'll want this to go off afterwards. But on the other side, of course, you might want it to go off sooner just to kill a character as well. So it just depends on the situation. But a pretty neat idea here to kind of turn things back on their on the enemy. And she's a caster, so she'll be really strong against Protectors in particular. And we have seen some Protectors who get really high attack values. We saw I think it was Grom who passively buffed his attack with some ability. So, this could be a really good counter in those situations. All right, so next up here we have Flame Buffet, and this one in particular, I know this is just a tooltip, but that's what they showed, so that's what we got. I don't know the speed. This one deals 14 damage to an enemy. If your party has another dragon, also damage adjacent enemies. So this is a tier 5 we can see. So 14 damage is not crazy out of whack with what we've seen for other AoEs. And if you got some dragon synergy action happening, it is going to hit all 3 characters. But, even like Anduin's AoE at tier 3 dealt 8 damage to all enemies. So this isn't like crazy beyond that for a caster. But, against Protectors, this is going to be a really big hit to multiple characters. But you would just have to have a dragon in this case to make it work. So some necessary synergies there to make this one really worth it. And then finally here for Alex, we've got Dragon Breath. Deals 14 damage to an enemy or restores 20 health to a friendly character. So either big heal or big single target damage hit here for Alexstrasza. I mean, I like the flexibility here. This utility seems pretty nice. Seems like a good single target finisher option or just damage chunk. And if you need to in a pinch, 20 health seems like a pretty noteworthy heal as well. So Alex, I don't know. She's not doing anything crazy fancy here, I'd say. But it's some interesting maybe counter synergy stuff with Dragon Queen's Gambit, some solid AoE options in a dragon build, and some flexibility here. So a mix of support and damage output. But you could see this as maybe a specialized tech almost to certain Protector builds if they got really good, or certainly in PvE scenarios, if you're fighting off against a Protector boss or whatever, Alexstrasza might be able to do some crazy stuff. So I feel like less of a general use character, but maybe one that's really good in specific scenarios. So perhaps weak on average, but a mercenary you want to keep around for those perfect situations. She might just be able to do some crazy stuff. So yeah, that wraps it up for all the mercenary casters that got shown so far. There were a few other details and abilities here and there, but these are the only ones we have the kind of full picture on. As far as I could tell. So hopefully this gave you some insights into what these characters might be like, what kind of synergies they might work well with. I think I gave a decent picture overall of how these might be utilized. going to be fun to see these in action and see where we can really go with these sorts of characters. That said, if you have any thoughts or insights I didn't cover on these particular mercenaries, of course, share those in the comments. I'm still learning as well. I'm not the be all end all of mercenaries knowledge here. So share your takes. You might have some great insights. I'm curious to hear them myself. Thanks much for watching. Stay tuned for the fighters. There's a lot of fighters that have been revealed. That one's going to be a lot of fun to break down. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and until next time, game on.